Welcome, everybody, to the Sunday Dialogue. We're missing a member, but he's on vacation, so we'll give him a pass. He didn't say anything this morning. How are you doing, Ethan?
Excellent, wonderful to be here. An honor to speak with you, Headless, as always.
Awesome. Thank you guys for showing up. And we were talking before the show about monotheism and the possibility that we're sort of breaking the grip of monotheism. And, a lot of people might be sensitive about that, but I think there's certain benefits that I think a lot of people don't know about when it comes to monotheism and sort of the way that things get programmed out in the rest of society is sort of like a reaction to or trying to get in line with this kind of monopolar control systems that go along with monotheism. So first thing I'd like to talk about is Platonism, right? So Plato was all about this one, and he didn't put a name on it, and he didn't try to personify it. He was just saying everything emanates from the one, and this really got the wave of monotheism started in a philosophical direction. And what you find all the time within Christian theologies, Jewish theologies, is that they constantly make this switch between the Platonic one idea and then the myths and the stories about their God. And they can't match up the two precisely, but it's enough to where most people don't notice. So like if you're saying these philosophical principles lead us to a one source of everything, that's one statement. And then another statement would be that God created the world in 6 days. Those two don't exactly match up. They're not exactly on the same level. One takes a lot more extraordinary evidence to produce. The other one is more like a thought experiment. It's like, well, maybe since we're seeing these things happen, maybe it all comes from a one thing. And the switch between these two happens in conversations about these topics. And most of the time, people don't notice. But once you do notice, you can't really unnotice it anymore. And you're like, I see what you're doing. You're making the substitution. So there's a philosophical one. And now that has to do with the Bible because these stories are already there and we're going to go with that. But they're not really linked.
And the Bible really says it right there, doesn't it? It's the Bible means the book, and it implies the one book. I think with that idea, that Platonic idea and its diffusion into religion and so forth is a big one, Headless. And a point of confusion, I think, in that word or understanding of the meaning is one and oneness, right? Because there actually is no the one in oneness. It's just, right? There's no distinct one in oneness. There's just, the oneness. And so it's a very different idea from saying the one, which makes a distinct being or ideation or whatever, however you want to put it, into the oneness. Now there's the one in the oneness, a totally different idea. So I think that is a big spiritual kind of fracture in the very beginning of our religious conceptualization. Oneness, we don't even think about it so much. We think of the one, which is the main director and creator that is outside of the oneness, often not the oneness itself.
Right. Well, I think Plato got a lot of his inspiration for his ideas on the oneness and the sort of monopolar creation concept from the Eleatic school. The Eleatic school was Parmenides and Zeno and several other ones that don't get mentioned in the historical record that really shook things up with Parmenides' work on nature. And so in On Nature, he posits that motion is impossible. And that really shook things up because people had a hard time with that concept. Is like he's saying that, hey, because you can actually move all the way to another object, that means there has to be some sort of medium that ties everything together in between. And so therefore all things are one thing, and therefore motion in abstract space is impossible. And it wasn't until they developed better mathematics for dealing with problems like this and trigonometry that they were able to come up to a solution for Zeno's paradox. And Zeno's paradox was one of the things that, these Socratics really had a problem with. And they were just like, well, what if we just ignore the problem and talk about all this other stuff, this ontology that came from Parmenides, and use that instead? So the concept of ontology on the nature of being came through Parmenides in the ancient Greek world as well. And so they shifted away from his more physical problems and started talking more about the ontology problems. And this is where you get this idea of the oneness of being, is because Parmenides posits that everything comes through this one source, but it has so many different emanations. And he compared it to the theogony of the Greek gods. So, you've got this one source, then you have future generations of gods, and then we're here. And these represent all of the forces in the universe, all of the, the higher perceptions and all the rest of that stuff. And that's kind of in the world of opinion, as he calls it. But the one source is the world of the absolute. And so that's why in Plato, you have his ideas of the oneness being the absolute. It came through the Eleatics. And the Eleatics didn't have a lot of the baggage that Plato had, because we don't have a lot of their writings. We just have a few of the responses, and on nature, which was reprinted over and over again. So, this is one of the unsung heroes of the philosophical age that I think really started the ball rolling in the direction of monotheism. And a lot of other cultures were kind of there to take it up. If you look at the Persians, they had this school of thought that had a bunch of demons and stuff. And then it all sort of came together as, what was it called? Help me out. Why can't I think of it? It's not Jainism.
No, is it Monachism?
No, Manichaeism is later, but this is the.
I know what you're talking about. You're right.
Zarathustra. Man,
Zoroastrianism.
There we go. Zoroastrianism. I should have known that. But anyways, the Zoroastrian influence on early forms of Hebrew ideas comes through the Pharisees, right? So in Hebrew, Pharisee means Persianizer. It's just like the word Farsi. And so their concepts of heaven and hell and angels and all the rest of that stuff comes through the Persian, the Pharisees. So all of that stuff happened in, Zarathustra's religion. And then
some very interesting polarity in the Zoroastrianism that does, as you say, kind of gets integrated into biblical things, and it very much to me harkens to the Taoist polarity stuff that was going on at the time in China, and of course all of this was all connected via the Silk.
Exactly, and so when this Persian influence hits early Judaism, it it goes through a cultural diffusion, right? So this society that has way more focus on legal aspects starts to turn what is non-doctrinal, Zoroastrianism over into a heavily doctrinal, legalistic framework in Judaism. And then that becomes, the Second Temple Judaism. And then what emerges out of that is sort of a Greek rebellion to that Pharisaical way, right? And so that Greek rebellion gets exemplified through Jesus Christ. And so you have this Hellenized version with this dying and rising God, much more Thracian in influence than a lot of the Hebrew stories, right? Because they wanted a conquering Moshiach, which, the Old Testament, if you think about all the conquering that was going on back then, you could see why they would want that. But this one was much more Greek Dionysian, spiritualized form of Moshiach, which is not native to the Bible. So it's a Greek influence, I would say. And so once you start putting this together into the more modern context, 700 AD, you have the Christian influence and the Hebrew influence affecting what was native Arab religions, which was vastly expansive and or polytheistic. They even had all these figures of other people's gods in all of their temples. And that was like a regular part of it, is like, this is how we show honor to all of our customers, how we show honor to all these other cultures. We honor all the gods. And then immediately the backlash was Muhammad saying there is only one God and all these other ones have to go. And that, monotheistic aspect right there creates these three that end up, playing off of each other. And this really, I think, goes back to the precession of the equinoxes. So what we see in ancient history is that these different ages are exemplified by certain symbols, right? So you've got the age of Aries being exemplified by the goat. And then you've got all these goat stories during the age of Aries back in biblical times. It's like they're coding all these images with the certain periods of religiousness that they associate with the different zodiac signs. You've got the age of the bull being Taurus and having all these Taurus signals, right? And now in the present age, we're talking about the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. The Jesus fish everywhere is the age of Pisces. But now that we're exiting the age of Pisces, I think it becomes the time to start thinking about, what do you want to leave the next 2,000 years in terms of a connection with the divine. And I think it's time that we actually start thinking about that. I mean, it might be up to us. We might be in a very prominent shaping period for how spirit and the rest of the world of the unseen is perceived. So what are your thoughts on that?
I wanted to mention how powerful of a shift it was 2,000 years ago to enforce monotheism in effect. And for the astute audience, I think they realize about the 2 paths of the Kabbalah, or we could even talk about those 2 pillars, paths, pillars, poles, polarity, paths, as kind of the esoteric aspect of what would be foundational to the monotheistic exoteric presentation. And there is, of course, the pole of severity and the pole of what is it? It's been eliminated so much I don't even have the term.
Strength. The pole of severity and the pole of strength. So these are both the extremes,
Right. And so one polarity we can see was eliminated, and that we have left severity. And that is exemplified as Yahweh. Yahweh, El, and these are all storm gods that create through destruction. And so one whole polarity and consideration was really eliminated. And I mean, now he also is lonely. He doesn't have a feminine aspect. So you can see the foundational monotheistic influence that is 2,000 years old in just how we consider creation and destruction. It's all via a storm god, which there is a whole other polarity of creation and destruction rather than through severity, but through strength and fortitude. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's so atmospheric in its influence that it's hard to really recognize.
Right. Well, that's the whole idea behind being inundated in symbols. And you can think back to 2001 when you've got these two great big pillars that both come down. And you have to ask yourself, is this not related to these spiritual principles that we keep talking about? Are these not the symbols that they're using to usher in these new ages? Maybe if we're there, we can look around now and be like, well, post 9/11 world is all about electronic communications. And if you think about electronic communications, what better symbol is there than the sign for Aquarius? The age of Aquarius is now this electronic communication age. And it's like this is the new religion. You've got the AI springing up that people are, joining cults for and stuff. And they're making these grandiose statements about, well, we killed God, but now the computer is God. I don't think that's an accident either. And the Aquarius is like this a watery air symbol. And what better way to exemplify watery air than like radio waves? Got all these little waves traveling through the air as if it was water. And this is how we get our communications. This is how we're talking right now. You can almost say we're worshiping the machine by interacting with it. There's some kind of a religious context here, but since it's kind of right in front of us, it's hard to see. Maybe it'll be up to future generations to suss this out. But you can kind of see the different developments having these different symbols, and these are physical changes, in our immediate environment.
Yeah, there is a real movement to kind of unite technology to enhance us. I think there's I need to look into it further, but there is the hemi-sync meditation concept, where you essentially listen to binaural beats. You bring together the left and right hemispheres, and the deductions have been essentially that you get the same benefit in 5 minutes of using this technological modification in your meditation that you might get in 20 years of being a monk. And so there is this potential benefit, but it's going to be about what people use it for and what people are drawn to. It's interesting, as all these things are happening, there is in our kind of circles maybe an interest in Gnostic teachings, not necessarily religious, but maybe there's a lot of teachings that you can get out of religious books and writings and so forth that are not necessarily monotheistic or ardently religious, that are more, metaphysical towards enlightenment. But it's interesting. There is, I would say, the vast majority of people who might use the word Gnostic would use it to describe themselves as agnostic, which is just a strange influence, a strange, word that's popularized.
Right. I am without knowledge.
Right. It's basically just like, I'm an ignorant slave and don't want to know things. I don't want to know.
Well, think about the Socratic method. The only thing I know is that I don't know. So there's kind of an openness at the end of that,
But I infer from agnostic that it's just anti even pursuing, whereas Gnostics, they're pursuing, right? They're but you're right. That is a good point. They're at least professing they don't know.
Right. So I think the Socratic influences in our society are really present. Once you get to know the texts, you'll start to see how people's minds are shaped by these different Greek concepts being played out in real time, in the term of Platonism and all the rest of these ideas. The Illuminati is heavily influenced by the ideas of Platonism, heavily. Right, Plato's Republic,
and just the ancients in total, right? How they find ancient teachings in Egypt and so on and so forth, and all of a sudden, coming up with new ideas.
He's here.
Hi. Just a second.
Good day, Mr. Canada.
How are we today?
Oh,
Very
Canada.
good.
I'm sorry, I didn't know it was this early.
It's so different when you're on a different continent.
Yes, very much so. Now I can
Well,
hear you.
right. So we're on the topic of Platonism and the Socratic, philosophies and how they interact with us. And I was talking about this really strong linkage between Christianity and Platonism. And it almost seems like Christianity, Platonism, and Judaism all come through this philosophical school, and they end up making these substitutions where, you've got all these stories about God in the Bible. They substitute in this philosophical God anytime they sort of feel like it. And so when you start arguing and debating these topics, you see the Platonism coming out on one hand, and then being substituted with these stories from the Bible on the other. And it's really interesting and convenient that they're able to do that sort of thought switch. And if you're not paying attention, you don't see it. But once you can identify the Platonism in people's reasoning, you can kind of see where some of the flaws might seep in. One of them being this idea of, monotheism as being a personalization. When it's in Platonism, monotheism was a very depersonalized thing. Like it was a thing way off and not interacting immediately with physical matter around it. It didn't really have a personality. It was just called the one. But all of these things shifted once it came back into a religious context.
But no matter what religion, how do you define it without using philosophy? Right? No
Very
matter
true.
what it is.
Usually that was included in like the names and the identities of the people in the story. So most mythology just simply refers to a person as, the thing that he's doing, right? In a lot of ways that sort of shows you the philosophy behind it, because it's really easy to decode, and the ideas are there, they're available, and it's true on more than one level, right? So it's kind of an esoteric type thing. Well, when you get into the biblical literalism, you kind of lose a lot of those interpretations because it has to be this way, because this is, literal history, even though that's not how these rules of mythology work. And so it removes another layer of understanding from the thing that you live by, which is.
May I share something I think that's really powerful format, and it is from religion, but I think it's also kind of like a key to get out of some of the bars that it imposes as well. And I think that's why it's referred to as the pathway to paradise often enough. The four pards, or four PRDS, is the four ways to interpret. It's described as biblical teachings, but it is four ways to interpret any metaphysical idea, Buddhist and beyond. There is the literal and the allegorical and the comparative and the secretive. And that there are many different streams under those four sets. In other words, astrological could be comparative or secretive and so on. But I think it's a helpful way to kind of break the limitations of especially religious dogma, which the more ardent the monotheism, the less interpretation is allowed, we'll see, right? There's only literal interpretation allowed in some different forms of monotheism.
Right. Well, I think the literal is very handy when it comes to deciding court cases, right? You've got to have these literal interpretations so that you can do the same things that are in the book. And in that case, you're talking about a lot of weird stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense. And you end up with these combinations of things that you don't get in other contexts. So for instance, Zoroastrianism was non-doctrinal. It didn't, make these things like impositions in your life that you had to constantly be doing so that you could be in communion with the God. So all of these stories were more like poems, and these poems then influenced the formation in the Levant area, creating Judaism.
Sounds
So
pleasant.
right, but it's the cultural diffusion. You could see where they put their values, and that transferred over to this other system. Which, when you look at it like that, you can start to track all these different phases throughout history as well, because you had lots of invasions in the region, like the Neo-Assyrian invasion. That was a huge part of biblical history. This is
Conversion.
the first. What's that?
And conversion into their own philosophical ideas and concepts of religion.
Right. Well, the Neo-Assyrians were very formative because this was the first diaspora. And so that first diaspora, where they all went to Babylon, really shaped, the way that they viewed all the rest of these different cultures around them. And especially the Neo-Assyrian part, because when you understand how bloody those cultures were, you can kind of see why they would write the way they did in the Bible, because they were all about genocide and all the rest of that stuff. And it was not very thinly veiled. And then it's like, how does this go along with the rest of the Bible? It's like, they're killing a lot of people. What's going on here? Well, again, it's this idea of creating a diversion between what you say and what you do. And as long as God tells you to do it, and you've got the priests go ahead, you can do anything you want to.
That's
Yeah,
right.
but and you can see the danger, and you can see the danger in Biden.
That is the danger. Yeah. I was going to add, as soon as you differentiate a one within the oneness, you actually have created more than one, right? Because there's the one and then everything else, right? And that's the monotheistic, I call it, it's breaking the spiritual golden rule, because you're being exclusive. That's why monotheistic approaches actually have kind of this exclusivity about them. Each of the three monotheisms kind of refer to others outside of their belief system as less than, and so on, right? So it's actually exclusionary to sit. Monotheism says the one, and then everybody else is wrong.
Well, I would contend that polytheism is far more exclusionary than monotheism, because what they're doing is they're saying that these are our ancestors, and our ancestors should be the ones that are worshipped. That's very exclusive to all these other groups. The problem is that monotheism is too inclusive, to where they don't actually pay any attention to ancestors, at least in one form of monotheism, Christianity. Pay no attention to your ancestors whatsoever, but go into all the world and preach the gospel. And if they don't accept the gospel, what does God say to do to them?
Well, pay no attention to your ancestors if they don't follow the new paradigm in religious terms. Because if they do,
Right.
you have to honor their following and follow the tradition, right? So there's a difference between the chasm that starts the new religion and then its continuity, because before is no, you don't have nothing to do with your ancestors. Forget them. They're wrong. This is how it's supposed to be done. And from that point on is honor your ancestors and their followings, honor their God. Right? So
Right. Well, they had to, so that they could get the hooks in. I mean, it's very obviously a pyramid scheme, right? You got to have more land so that you can keep getting all these resources. But
and it worked when it was a small tribal situation, even though that, I don't mean to say it was good or moral, but I'm just saying it happened to work on a small situation. And now on a global scale, it's like, oh goodness, we're in trouble.
Well, if you worship your ancestors, why would you even want to bring in somebody else's gods? That's almost like spiritually unclean. It's like, ooh, that's really personal to that guy.
Well, I always thought it's like the polytheistic idea as being, I have my own bunch of ideas, and I just met this guy who has his own bunch of ideas, and nothing. Like whereas like monotheism is just like, oh, it's a battle. He took my Yahweh and now has interpreted it in the way that desanctifies X, Y, or Z, and it's a mess.
Right. Well, in the polytheistic monotheism or henotheistic model, right? That's where you've got one god above all the rest of the gods, sort of like the king of the gods, very common in Greece and stuff. That's more of like the henotheistic model. And in that model, all of these other gods from other tribes sort of take a lower position to the one main family tree. Like that's the root, you know? And then you've got Norse mythology and things like that, where they're literally talking about this tree being the home of the gods, right? They can move between these worlds and stuff. So it's like the family tree itself becomes the worship, and it's no longer directed at anybody else's stuff. So it's, you know, very insular. Well, at the same time, you know, once you get into the biblical context, it's like it's the exact opposite of that. In Origen, one of the church fathers, he proclaims now we can have communion with the rest of the world because of Christianity. And so his big idea was we need to spread out and get as many, you know, fingers out there as possible because we've got this new model of doing things. And so this Christian concept became a way of you know, constantly feeding into itself, because most people couldn't read. And for a long time, that's how they maintained their powers. We got to keep all these people stupid.
Sure.
As long as they're agreeing to what's in the book without them ever having to read the book, we're okay with that.
Well, the lineage idea too, I think, is not necessarily limited to Christianity, right? The Islam is all about the lineage to certain people, and Muhammad, and even China. They have Pangu is one of the creators, and
That
various.
was the first.
The Han and different races of the broader Chinese will claim, you know, direct lineage to this and that and so forth.
But Headless, I know you were going to speak, but I just wanted to say, to confirm what you were saying, that in Portugal, it was only after the 1950s, 1960s, and very slowly, that people had access to the Old Testament. So people could read, lots of people could read, but they limit the access. So the church would not allow the
Wow.
Old Testament to
the
come out.
50s in Portugal.
Yeah. So
In the
you
whole-
didn't have access to the Old Testament, right? And even to the New Testament, you only have this, what they call missals, that is like ceremony books, where you only have the passage that they want you to know.
Uh-huh. Wow.
You didn't have the whole book.
That's crazy. That
Yeah,
only
yeah.
in the 50s. I'm astonished. As the United States, where I think I'm of course wrong, but I think, you know, publications have the right of so forth. That's crazy. Sorry, Headless.
Well, I was going to say the big division in Islam is the lineage,
Yeah.
right? You've got the Sunni on one side who are saying the lineage doesn't matter, and the Shia on the other. I think they're the ones who believe that the lineage is very important. Or
Yeah,
I could
and I
have that
think
backwards. I think
one
I
is-
have it backwards.
I think one is very animistic, and the other is completely focused in this kind of monotheism. So they wanted to eradicate the animism from their culture. So the jinns, the elements, the powers of nature, they want to remove all that into someone that could actually control all of that and dictate, you'll have this or you'll have that. It's no longer nature that is in control. It's this being that controls all of that. And he speaks through this man. So listen to this man.
So think about the tribes now. So both, you know, the Greek form of Judaism, which would be Christianity, and the Islamic form of Judaism, which would be Islam, they both come in contact with the Proto-Indo-European groups, and then they get spiritualized. So up in Persia, that's where it's more animistic, Shia Islam. The Persians came through the Proto-Indo-European line, and the Greeks also came through the Proto-Indo-European line. But you know, Hebrew itself is a Afro-Asiatic language. It's not, and so is the Canaanite Phoenician language. So you're talking about different tribes of people and how they see the world coming into contact with each other through all of these lexicons we call words that are just, you know, complex symbols, and then it starts to change the nature of the religion.
Sure. Let me get this. Where do I have it? Here. This is the last paragraph of my Stardust book, and it says, while fear of the unknown undoubtedly played a role in the genesis of belief systems, reverence soon followed. The natural world, once seen as threatening, became a source of awe and inspiration. Early humans did not merely cower before the forces of nature, they celebrated them. Festivals marked the turning of the seasons, dances mimicked the rhythms of life, and art immortalized the sacred. This reverence laid the foundation for what would have become organized religion. The seeds of divinity sown in the fertile soil of early human imagination would grow into towering structures of worship and complex theological systems. But at their core, these belief systems retain their primal purpose to connect humanity with something greater than itself, to make the sense of the incomprehensible, and to find solace in the shared mystery of existence. And this would be all very pretty if it did not be turned into a form of control, right? So
That's this is all reminding me of the etymology of the word hordes, like the hordes of attackers is order followers. And the people that were encountering these, I believe the European people that were encountering Mongolian invaders, and they saw they were made up of many different peoples. They couldn't believe that they could all follow orders so efficiently, and the hordes of order followers. And so they took in what should be this magic sanctification of all these little snippets that we have of reality coming together, Ricardo, as you just eloquently described, and instead it's institutionalized and we get hordes.
sure. For instance, I'll give you this example. On the Gothic capital of Portugal, there is Santarém. You have, in a very small area that is probably the size of an industrial zone in the state, so it's not that big. It's a very limited area on top of a hill, so it's just the top of a hill. And there you'll find at least 36 churches, all on top of one another. So when I took people there, they questioned, so how did they fill all these churches? They're all different. They're all different sects. How did it rang and everyone go to its own church? What's the difference here, right? And you go to other places and you see there is this cathedral that concentrated the whole city into one place, right? So there must be something here that is different. And I think in the case of Santarém, because it's the 1100th century, most of the churches are from the 1100 to the 1300. It's not a matter of a place of cult, but it's a place of ceremony, because you have all these different factions from the Templars and the Hospitallers and the Malta ones, and they all wanted to have their church. They don't want to mingle with the other guys, so each one of them built their own church. And today we go there and say, this is so small. Where would you go? How are we going to fill all this? It wasn't supposed to be filled. It was, the churches were a place to do ceremonies that are private and for their own group instead of being for the collective. You would have the main church where everybody went, but all of the others were not places that people could access freely to go into to the mass. There was no mass.
Bloodline.
It was just cult.
Bloodline too, weren't they? All
Yes.
those groups in those temples were bloodline.
Exactly. Some come from France, some come from Cyprus, some come from England, some come from Spain. Each one of them had their own lineage and followed that.
The paganism never really left Europe. It just
Yeah.
went underground.
Yeah.
It just went underground. And then they had their own churches for it. These guys were gangsters too. I mean, like, that was one of their defining characteristics, is these are the toughest dudes in the world. Like, this is the European murder machine at this point, you know? Like, they had to stay sharp. That's what all this family stuff was about, is being defensive and understanding that people around you probably want to take advantage of you. Having that awareness is not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, they were pretty badass, I think.
They were.
Like, have you ever heard of the winged hussars?
No.
That's the Polish right?
Polish and Lithuanian, highly pagan group. They had only been converted less than 100 years before that. And these are the ones responsible for pushing the Muslims out of Europe and Austria, right? So they were coming all the way up in that region, and these guys came in on their horsebacks wearing big ass feathered outfits, right? Definitely from a more pagan time, and they absolutely routed them. And everybody thought the Europeans were done for because it had been a backwater. For 1,000 years, they were the most ignorant people on the planet. They just kept the reading material away from everybody. And so this was the point in time when that started to shift. And so the winged hussars basically put aside all of their differences with the rest of Europe for being, constantly occupied by Christian invaders trying to forcefully convert them, and stepped up and actually won Europe back for the Europeans. And nobody even knows they existed because they were kind of pagan.
Sure.
Don't talk about
they're not worthy to be on the books.
Still, the Polish warriors, and I suppose the Lithuanians too, even though they're more now a smaller country, I think still give shivers to the Russians, and that's why they have their fairy tales about those guys, I believe.
Yeah, they keep saying, we know what the feathers are, so don't push us.
Right, man. Well, think about that. It's so related to the sky god. The sky god concept was coming from the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and the Lithuanians actually have words that are identical to the early invaders, the Brahmins, right? So people in India can speak Lithuanian, and people in Lithuania can kind of speak,
really, wow,
Sanskrit.
They're that close.
In language groups, yeah, it was all one group, this Proto-Indo-European tribal, right? So you could start to really see how much more spiritualized it was before Christianity kind of sanitized it. They had a lot of things going on with their religion and how it related to the rest of the world.
Well, and it's kind of the morality of the Tower of Babel, right? Because you have people united and you can't control them while they're united. So you have to confound their tongues and make one not be able to speak with the other. And
bingo.
So I think it's the fact that we had a diffusionism happening, right? Where at least one language was more or less shared all over the place, right? And probably that's the language that was utterly lost, or it still resides here and there, but we don't know how to identify it and don't think of it as being a global thing.
Well, and to your point, and the similar star tales, right?
Sure.
That are shared by all these diverse peoples, separated by a long distance.
That was still used by the Chinese emperors. That is all under the sky. So it's the same sky for everyone. So it's the same rule for everyone, right? Somehow it was kept there as a teaching, as a fundamental way of ruling.
That was the Aryan March. They went all the way out there. All those Huns and everybody else, all the Mongolians, that's Proto-Indo-European. Like that was all over the place. And what they would do is they had patronage networks, right? So to protect from the other warlords in these other tribes, you would pay them in gold, and they would pay their horsemen in gold. And this is where you get the idea of, sort of like gold being of the gods. It was this symbol. They called it the flesh of the gods in Greek. But the idea was it was a symbol that was traded among the aristocrats. And the aristocrats were like the landlords that were sort of keeping you safe from all the rest of these areas. And that was the model of the Aryan, basically invasion of all the rest of the world. Is they would just set up shop, build a city, and then, protect that city from any other tribes, probably their other friends at some point in time.
And trying to keep it open to trade too, because they need to make money, right?
All along the Silk Road, it was held by the Proto-Indo-Europeans for many, many generations. That was their homeland, and then they got offset by the Khazarians after Rome fell from Gothic hands. So
sure.
That's what they became. It went Proto-Indo-European, Scythians, or no, Yamnaya, Scythians, and then up into the Goths. And that's all the same group. And the only people who consider them different are the anthropologists who constantly make these idiotic divisions between pottery styles. Like, just because you've got a different pottery style, it doesn't mean you're a different group. It's crazy.
And that is not clearly stated in history books. Although in my time it was still taught that the whole late 1400s was because of that fall of the Roman Empire and the loss of the Silk Road. They had to find a new way to go into India and keep the trade running, right? Because they needed those supplies. And so they had to go around Africa in order to keep doing the same trade routes that they had before, that was inland, right? But most of all, we hear that they want to discover. It was an age of illumination, and they want to see what's one beyond. No, they had economical reasons to do that, and that's why they went to dig for the old maps that they now say didn't exist. They were all done at that time. Went to the old maps and paid in their weight in gold for people that had those records, right? And
Right.
probably even destroyed the originals, so in order for no one else has but the copies to deliver to their king or whatever. So again, division.
But that division really does come through these tribal networks, you know. So the Scythians, or the Thracians, as they were later called, were supposedly the root of both the Greeks and the Thracians, or they later became the Trojans, right? These groups had very similar gods, and you could see that all over the place, especially with Dionysus, right? Dionysus is all over these tribes that are warring with one another. You know, somehow they share these gods while at the same time fighting each other. And so, you know, these Thracians were very, very influential in both Greece and Rome, because Rome was said to be the home of the escaping Trojans, right? So this Thrace region was very important for the spiritual history for all of Greece and Rome. And that's the first place that Christianity spread, with this new Dionysus worship, right, of Jesus Christ. And so it blended the Greek population that had all of these myths in their head with the Jewish population in diaspora from 70 AD, when Rome came in and crushed Israel. So it became this potent combination that would spread this Christianity all over the place, because it had the ancestral memories from the Thracians going all the way back to the time of the Trojan War to today, or today in their time. And so they thought it was a real revival. But Christianity never got above 5% of the population until it was mandated from Rome that they would now only worship Christianity. So it never really took off.
It was the majority that was asking for it. You see, 5%.
It's interesting, and surely they had manifested the tools within that program that has religious wisdom in it still, but they had political tools in it now that could better control people where they wanted, right?
If you want to talk political tools, you have to look at the Theodosian Codex, which is all of the laws that made paganism illegal. And in there, it only legalized two religions, which would be Christianity and Judaism. Only two left. Somehow, it was okay to be Jewish at the same time that they were saying to their own countrymen that had been worshiping by their side for years, hey, if you keep worshiping those gods, we're going to cut your head off. So you got to wonder, like, what kind of influence is being exerted here to get this 5% religion enacted into law that now affects absolutely everybody.
And go ahead.
No, go on, Ethan.
I was just going to say, certainly it is and was for the control of the mind, right?
I was just going to add that, for instance, in Iberia, the example we have from the year 1000 until 1100 is that the Muslims, contrary to the Christians, didn't care what was your religion. They just wanted, if you're not a Muslim, fine, you pay 5% of everything you make or sell. and that's fine for us, right? And so they were happy that everyone else was other religion because they collect the taxes, they still own the land, right? And
It's
it was
actually that's written in the Quran that they would respect people of the book in certain
exactly,
ways. Yeah, yeah,
and it was the Christians that were complete maniacs,
right. Yeah.
right?
I was going to say one example of the institutionalization of a what is perceived as a religious law for, and maybe it does have benefits, but was originally put forth as a political control mechanism is the prohibition of pork, which is a really big consumer of water and not good in a arid environment where water consumption is a big critical factor. So the control of pork had to be done. What do? You say God forbids it.
Exactly. And I see people that I think I should respect their knowledge because there's on the other side and dedicated lives to these kind of matters. And I see these people telling that the the pigs were responsible for many of the diseases that eradicated vast groups of population, right? And and from my own research, I had seen that in case of the Jewish religion, when they decided to cut that off, there had been a plague just before that, and they attribute it to the pigs. And so, because people are not stopping eating the pig anyway, because it's easy to raise a pig, it will eat anything, so it's something that you can raise
Mhm.
easily. And the only way they had to find to eradicate that in order to sanitize the problem was to create, as you said, the decree that pork was illegal and impure. It's even in the wording. It's an impure meat because to them was full of vermin and disease and was something of the devil, right? Like Christ sending all those pigs going down from the cliffs down. That is a passage that most people don't speak about. But he sent the horde of pigs. The demons enter the pigs and they rush into the cliff and they jump off the cliff down and they
Right,
all die.
right.
So it's all symbolic, of course. But
Well, and a lot of vegans point out that yeah, we would have no diseases if it wasn't for animal husbandry.
well, we
Well,
wouldn't be here also.
That's true too.
I have an interesting thought. So, what if a lot of the ancient conflicts that we read about today were actually started by land management and sanitation issues?
Yeah, yeah, good.
And
Yes,
then given a religious framework.
and moreover, beyond that one, which is so powerful, all these biological influences have really resulted in political and traditional things that were, yeah, based on biological predicaments of one form or another.
Yeah,
Especially in this time period.
there
Nobody
is
wants to be
Immediately after COVID, right? Or I said the word. Sorry.
sick.
there is this book by a Jewish guy coming out of a sister city of Venice that I can't remember the name, and he precedes Marco Polo.
The sister city, is it in Israel or is it nearby?
No, it's near Venice, but I can't remember the name. It's like
Excuse me.
it's a coastal
Yep,
city like Venice, but I can't remember the
gotcha.
name.
Yep.
And so this guy that's supposed to precede Marco Polo in China wrote this. It's called The City of Light, and he describes disgusted how the Chinese had their sewer system that was flowing on the sides of the street. So you were walking through the street, and the channels were on both sides of the street, where every deject from human or whatever would flow parallel to the street on site in open, right? And
Butchering and human waste and all the
everything would flow by the side of the road on either side.
just
And
asking for the problem.
exactly. And as you can imagine, in China was massive cities no matter where, so lots of people. And I think this contrasts with organization that we can go even to the Inca or to the Maya or even behind, when we see that the main concern before any city was built was to create a channel system that was underground, right? And this is only being found today in most of these sites because they didn't understand
They
what
were so massively purposeful that we didn't even see it.
we didn't see it.
Record.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they are finding tubes of clay that go two or three sorry, because I'm trying to say it in feet and I don't know how it is, but it's very long distance tubes that go through the rock into a place where they can be dumped without concerns to the population, right? To control sanitation areas.
This
And-
reminds me of what
no.
is. Oh, go ahead on this.
I just wanted to point out that Christianity is the only religion on the earth that made plumbing go away for 1,000 years. To make it back.
Well, somebody had to do it, right?
That was a real step forward to the path of God. The whole reason for
Then we have the Black Plague. Could it be related?
the whole they say that one of the main reasons for the idea for fragrances being associated with the sanctimonial and sacramental is because of it would take people away from how the outside world was so full of the rank and file
of shit,
of you name it, death, shit, all that, and then you'd go in the temple and you'd, oh gosh, it doesn't smell like that.
Oh, it's divine here. It's divine.
Yeah.
Did you know before the Black Plague, the Pope actually banned all the cats in Europe?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. No wonder.
So that the rats could.
What you're saying? Oh my God. How? Because they thought cats were taken up by the devil. They thought.
Yeah, they spiritualized the cats. They said these are of the devil.
Did they really?
Yep.
Jeez, good Lord.
Yeah, but I'm seeing the second intention. There is.
Of course, me too. Of course,
there is no more control over the rats, and the rats were the one that caused the supposedly the Black Plague, right? So
that's it. Very well, looking back on it, could have been.
It's so smart that it's hard to believe because it's so bright.
So devious. It's so devious if they actually knew the implications of what they were doing. It's so dastardly that it's almost like hard to say that they did it purposefully, but wow, it sure is possible.
Think about how much they hate us today.
Jeez. Right, because and why is there hatred? Because we're not their monotheism, right? Often enough, whether that monotheistic or monothematic mindset even pertains to religion, it doesn't even matter. It could be nationalism, and it could be scientism, even, and any number of other isms.
And they were mingled. They used to be mingled. Those two.
Think about the
awfully enough they are.
Think about the tribal implications. If you had leaders who are still warriors who rise up through the tribal ranks, worshiping tribal gods, going to, let's say, an elected body, you can pretty much know everything you need to know about them because they wear it on their sleeve. It's part of their family. It's part of their history. You get a lot better feel for these people because they have to be transparent about these things if they're going to achieve levels of power within these other hierarchies that have existed before Christianity took hold. For Christianity, you have to have leaders that hate the people because that's what keeps people returning to the church.
Yeah, but even and I learned this from you, even Christianity started as a very pagan religion, right?
Well, it brought the concept of shame, deeply into the whole worship factor. And so the idea there is you have to keep people in this shame contact so that they keep returning. Hold on. I got a phone call. I've been getting a lot of scam calls. Have you?
No, not more.
It varies. The point of attack, it varies. These guys are all concentrated in a building floor in India. I'm not kidding. So
I know.
if you look for this, it's very interesting. If you look for these videos on YouTube of guys that the only concern is to destruct and make a hell of the life of these scammers. These are highly intelligent guys in terms of computer, and so what they do is they infiltrate their system and they make them go round and round until they completely berserk and reveal themselves, and they show the images from the floor of the building. So they rent the building for 6 hours a day, and during those 6 hours they're calling the whole world doing these schemes and making money. So I think this appeared in some movie. I don't remember what the name was, but where they were scamming the people like that. But they make millions a day with this stuff, right? They put people going into the street to the cash machine or giving all their data. Look, there's a problem with your account. We don't know what to do. You're at risk. We need to reset all your codes, and people believe this. So again, this shows in terms of religion
Well,
and
they get a lot of
how
their victims.
gullible people are in a situation of distress. Again, the Broca's brain, the reptilian brain enters in action, and you become stupid immediately.
Yep. A lot of their victims are old though. But yeah.
Well, now what was going on a lot is you have a package, and we can't deliver your package. So could you please fill this form in order for us to? And in the form, you have to put all your data and
Ruthless.
identification number and the account number, and people fall for it because a lot of people are expecting packages, right? So they are
Right.
clever.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you remember the videos of the dummy packages they sent to these scammers in India? They had like 3 packs of fart spray inside of it and like all this glitter. And like once they opened it, it would just spray glitter all over the office and just, flood the
And
place with
fart
fart
spray.
spray.
Classic.
Right. It's the perfect defense offense. But nothing really stops these people because there's really there's no extradition. There's actually no risk to them in a different country just trying to scam us.
And look, if instead of getting $1 a day in India, that's the pay, it's $1 a day, right?
Fuck.
If you go to work in this office, you might get $5 a day. So you are almost a millionaire, right? So who gives a shit if you're scamming these people on the other side of the world? There's a lot of people that don't care about that. They're just trying to survive. So morality is a very complex thing because it involves many sides. So it's an old story of good and evil. What is good and evil? It's a matter of perspective. It's just perspective.
Right. Well, nobody deserves it more than our boomers. So go get them, guys.
Well, I was gonna bring up something that's kind of related to our predominant monotheism, but maybe not so broadly known. There's the 4 Gospels of the Bible, right? And
the ones that they showed us, there are a lot more, but yes,
there may be, but I think that, and people have researched this before, that the reason there are 4 is, like you said, Ricardo, not because that was the totality, but that was the symbology, right? They wanted to use the archetypal foundation of 4. Not that it's overtly mentioned in the Bible necessarily. But they are using this primordial kind of human thing, and Greek thing too. And of course, the Greeks had their influence on the design of the finalization, if you will.
There used to be the 4 humors, right? They defined the body.
There's the 4 humors.
Yeah.
They beckon some esoteric lessons, even just in their color format, which is related to the alchemical colors, black, yellow, and red, and white is the 4. So that's a very interesting duality of polarity that also the Chinese understanding of the TCM is really based on the beginning format of what one's predicament might be is over yin or over yang, an imbalance of these four forces. Major yin and minor yin, major yang and minor yang, in that
Yeah, you
force.
just made me see that there are four parts of the yin and yang.
Yes, and some might say five, maybe even you could determine six. There is the midline, which is known as the pole, even though it's more of a snake. And there's also an imaginary dot too. But I think of the four components as being the major aspects, certainly. There's a dot that the energies are supposedly flowing around that you can't
Around
see.
it, yeah, the central
Yes.
point, the dumb follows of the yin and yang. Yeah.
So there's from the Bible kind of concept, the Greeks and with the Pythagoreans more than Platonists had this reverence.
Where did Pythagoras come from? Where did Pythagoras come from?
No, I just mean
No. I mean, what
the
part?
town. I forget offhand. What was it?
He was from Thrace as well.
Right.
So all of this number stuff, that's coming through
He's
Thrace.
all Thracian. It's all Thracian, as you mentioned, right?
Right.
And his crew, we could deduce his philosophy was all about the Tetractys, which is a 4-layer concept of it looks like a pyramid, but it's a triangle with one dot at the top, and it's all about geometry. The dot being symbolic for the point dimension in geometry, the 2 dots being symbolic for a line. That's the minimum number of points one needs for a line. The 3 dots symbolic for a plane. That's the minimum number of points you need for a plane. And the 4 dots at the base of this pyramidal triangle being symbolic for the volume, minimum number of points you need for a volume. So they were in overt or at least somewhat esoteric terms really looking at the generation, the God kind of idea in terms of geometry, obviously, right? And really specifically the 4 dimensions as we see in the Tetractys. And I wanted to just mention too that in terms of now bringing it back to modern day occultism and esoteric ideas and divination. The whole divination practice of tarot is based on number and dimension, if you will, being the 4 suits, but all the cards and of course symbolism. But the 4 suits, they're not just 4 suits, they're actually right there in correspondence with the geometry of the 4 dimensions. The sword is symbolic for the point. The wand or staff is symbolic for the line. The coin is symbolic for the plane, and the cup is symbolic for the solid or volume. So it all goes back to the, as you mentioned earlier, Headless, how influential Greek understandings and teachings are. Not only have they influenced the 4 Gospels and our understanding of mathematical, geometrical things, but also sacred geometry itself, and even the tarot, more than likely, just by that extension.
Right, and it's kind of subliminal. I think there's that quality to this European style of storytelling. I think that really gets kicked off well with Plato. If you think about his Timaeus, there's so many different layered versions of meaning coming through there. And that's the one where he's talking about, Atlantis. So is there a secret meaning behind that? Because this Atlantean idea, that survives all of this, uproar into Christian times, and it fascinated them as well. So it's almost like that was a constant after a certain point, is that this fascination with Atlantis kind of survived all of these different upheavals, you know.
I think this is some kind related to what they present to us in a very devious way. That is the is existentialism, or the philosophy of choice. Right? And about that, I have here saying this, that existentialism, with its focus on individual experience and the inherent meaningless of life unless filled by personal choices, has shaped modern conceptions of free will. Jean-Paul Sartre is a good example, as his maxim, existence precedes essence, which I find very curious as an expression, posits that humans are defined by their actions and choices, not by any predetermined nature. This philosophy places the burden of creating meaning squarely on human shoulders. Other would be Albert Camus, I think that's how it's spelled, that in his The Myth of Sisyphus, do you know this?
Sisyphus.
Sisyphus, yeah.
Yeah, presents. Go on, go on.
Well, no, you're going to describe it.
Presents the human condition as absurd, yet he champions the act of rebellion through choice, where Sisyphus finds meaning in its endless task, asserting his existence through his actions. So this means responsibility. So with choice comes the responsibility for the outcomes, a theme echoed across existential literature and philosophy. This responsibility can be both liberating and terrifying, as it places the onus of meaning making on the individual. Then there is what we see on the populations of today. There is the anxiety of choice. There is the freedom to choose in an indifferent universe can lead to existential anguish, as described by Kierkegaard, where the individual must confront the void and decide what to become. And then we have finally authenticity. That is, living authentically, according to existentialists, is about making choices true to oneself, embracing the freedom to define one's existence, which is the ultimate expression of free will. And yet, this is used to control populations, which I find a conundrum. But it's very interesting, because at the same time they're saying you're free to choose in a democracy or a more modern culture. At the same time, you're put with the anxiety of choice, and then you say, no, I prefer that you choose for me. I just go there and vote yes, right? So you all choose, I just follow, because it's too
so much easier.
It's too stressing to choose.
Yeah. It used to be that Sky Daddy would tell us what to do, and now we want Government Daddy to tell us what to do, because It's just easier. It's just easier.
See, nothing changes under the sky. It's just a matter of semantics. So,
it is kind of depressing how we got here, though. I mean, it was this whole shift towards scientism and atheism, and sort of like a loss in connection to
agnosticism.
Right, agnosticism. Yeah. And then it sort of it was a slide into that existential dread of everything doesn't make sense, because you got to have more choices, since you don't really have any choices in spirituality. There's only really one thing going around.
But then we are getting too much choice, and they decide to present us with this woke community that say you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't do this.
Let me there's a phrase in Chinese: if you want to control your cattle, give them a big field. And so there's the this modern conundrum is almost a great control mechanism, because we have a huge field. I mean, of course there is that electric fence at these external edges, but we have so many choices along the way that just keep us in the field.
Yeah, but if you give them a big field, and I'm talking about humans here in allegory terms, if you give them a big field, but you concentrate the water in one place, right? You're going to force them to circle that point. It doesn't matter how big the field is. It doesn't matter how big the field is, because the food and the water will be in one place only. And then you create conditions to get to that water and to that food. And then you say,
Yep.
no, but these fellows get to the water and to the food first than other
But you
fellows.
can go wherever you want.
Oh, sure, go. You can go and starve and live as you choose, but this is where the water and the food is.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Well, there's the social aspect as well, because cows are highly social animals. Like they stick to their herd. They have best friends. They have all these different complex social interactions that, humans have as well. And so our connection to everybody else keeps us coming back to that well of culture, even though we know it's not good for us sometimes,
True. And you have that example that is given through I don't know if in English it's called a fabula. There is a tale of animals that represents humans. So
Right.
you have the tale of the wolf, the wolf pack. There is that wolf that doesn't follow the rules, and so the pack excludes him completely from the access of the privileges of the pack. So he's forced to fend for himself, and 90% of them will die. And so as we absorb this information, we start to accumulate this idea that we need to be involved in something. We need to be part of the society. We need to follow the rules. We need to follow school, get a job, get married, get kids, work until retirement, and die. That's your purpose in society, right? That's all
Well,
you have to do.
those are those social boundaries, right? So we all end up falling into the trap of what are these guys going to think of me if I do this, or what are those guys going to think of me if I do that? And so having traditions based solely on repeated choices for the same sake of somebody else, you're going to find that there's a huge dearth in potential, right?
True.
And that's a big issue that I see popping up again and again.
Yeah, and when you get the society to be evolved to the point where everyone has a good perception of culture, of education, right? People start thinking from themselves, and what happens? The rates of birth decline because they understand the means where they are, right? And the constraints of what that brings in a society. And so you're not producing offspring. That's fine. Let's bring all of these people that are very behind in terms of cultural and knowledge. Let's bring all of these people in. They'll have lots of children that will work for much less money, right? And they can easily be controlled until they finally get to the point where you are, and then you have to bring another set of people in, right? And so I think this is one of the reasons why we're getting this mass excuses for immigration to be allowed to come in, because people are starting to understand that probably this is not the best society for us to do as we are supposed to do, right?
Right.
I'm barely surviving myself, so I'm not going to bring more people to the world or pay more services just because it's what I'm supposed to do, right? So
Right.
perhaps the first step was not going to church. Perhaps
But
that's
what happens? What happens with the stress and anxiety of now bringing in all these new people? Now the birth rates go even lower because all that stress and anxiety is going to
Sure,
create the sensation.
but the fear factor increased, and that's great for
Right.
for whoever is controlling, because if you keep people in fear, they'll follow your instructions, right?
It's a demographical weapon, you know?
It is. It serves many purposes, but yes.
Right. And I think that's important to understand, is that people have been thinking about demographic weapons for a long, long time. And what we see going on right now in Gaza represents demographic weaponry.
Sure.
That's kind of the modus operandi for a long, long time.
And
people who
I
play
don't
the
think. Sorry, I cut you off, Heather. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say people who play the long game are thinking about what kind of stories they can craft to the end of how we can get what we want as well.
I was just going to say, when you brought up that horrible situation in Gaza, no one is really referencing it in terms of the results of monotheism. Because what we're seeing is happening. I say that not because every person involved is religious necessarily, but it is the heart of where these religions fashioned themselves and from where they're from. And we're
Ethan,
seeing the result of just horrible treatment to the brotherhood of man. Please tell us.
I don't know if you know this, but it's been confirmed that they sacrificed one of these red heifers the other day.
Oh, right. There goes the psychotic Christian monotheists bringing red heifers to the psychotic, which is, I mean, who knows what it's going to do, what it means, but it just shows you how much of a mind screw monotheism is, right? But yeah, no one's putting this horrible situation in terms of the result of 2,000 years of monotheism, which is what we're seeing playing out. The racism, nationalism, placism, all these things, and as you mentioned, your term, sorry, but they're literally just killing a weaker set of people for what has religious roots.
Yeah, but you have to see this mass control of opinion, where it both works as forgetfulness and lack of understanding or lack of perception of reality. When we talk about Gaza, people don't understand we're talking a very narrow band of land when these people were pushed into.
Sure.
Right? That is
Ricardo,
so small.
Did you know that land has never been part of Israel all throughout Israel's history way back in the past? That was Philistia. So this is what the rest of it was named after, is Philistia. So one of the reasons why, they could be doing such a horrible thing over and over again there is because they've got thousands of years of, hatred for never having taken Philistia.
And belief that they are us and them. It's an us and them mentality that's 1,000 plus 2,000 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, but when the supposed Israelites were moved into there, they were living on the same fields as the Palestinians because it's no man's land. That was no man's land, and they were living with their wagons side by side, right, on these fields. So what the heck happened for all of a sudden the Jews managed to grow in power in such a way they can start pushing and pushing?
Monothematic mind. Monothematic.
Well, I think it goes back even further. I think this comes out of the Canaanite Phoenicians. Like, Canaanite Phoenicians were heavily involved with the Neo-Assyrians. It was a very culturally diverse place, and they had to maintain methods of control. And a lot of that goes into how they preached and taught different classes of people. They had a lot of slaves. And so they would try and keep people in these information bubbles and try to teach slave religions. And a lot of the idea there is that by telling them things like, if you do what the master says, you can live eternity in a mansion after you die. That was a popular use of the slave religion, You would say things like that.
There's elements of that, right? That's not there, right? It's overtly.
It's pretty Canaanite, yeah. So, I mean,
well,
I wonder.
I mean, I bet one thing that all three of us share is that we have Viking blood in us from the, warring of these people and taking over of the world, of the European world by them. And so I wonder what their elements that they had within their religion, if they had it, that was kind of oriented towards giving the slave hope so that they would be a good slave. Or I wonder if they were just excluded from the belief system, maybe in total, right?
They had a different kind of slavery. Their slavery was more like Native American slavery, because Native Americans
indentured servant kind of thing.
Right. They had what they called a thrall class of people. So you would have free men, you would have jarls, and then you would have the thrall class. And they were like the servants. They would kind of work in the household, be part of the household. You're sort of taking on the responsibility for them for as long as they're there. So you're trying to keep good standing with your neighbors, so you're not beating up your slaves, right? So it's kind of that's kind of the deal for slavery up there. It's not the same as the kind of slavery they talk about in Sparta, for instance. That was a different kind of slavery. But there are different slavery types all over the place. The Barbary Coast is not the place you want to become a slave at.
Oh God, right. Or yeah, anywhere where it's systematic like that.
Right.
Well, it's funny you talk about slaves because I saw a post and I reacted to it this week, and I'm not see if you can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Yeah, let me get it. There we go.
Okay, so I really have a problem with these people keeping insisting, and this is highly controversial, but on this, it was the biggest period of slavery on the history of the earth, these 400 years of slavery and so on. It was massive. So I went and looked of if was it so, because it was not my perception. So the transatlantic slave trade to the Americas, so between the 1500s and 1866, has 12.5 million people shipped, but only 10.7 people arrived because we know most of them didn't survive, right, the trip. But go to modern slavery, okay? Go to post 1900s, right? Compare these two.
Today, that's so today we have 100 million slaves possibly in
To
existence.
200, possibly 2 million slaves, right? But if you go up, so the transatlantic that they say was the biggest period, it's 12.5 maximum, right? But just in South America alone, we have 10 million, 5 to 10 million, right? The barbarian slaves is 1 to 2 million. The Arab Muslim has 50 to 100 million of people, right? Then you have the medieval Europe, including the Viking slave trades. It's 20 to 40 million people. The African internal slavery is 50 to 100 million. And here I would argue that you have to add this ones because there was no European selling black slaves to Europeans. It was black people selling black people to white people, right? I think we all agree with that. And so we have to add this internal slavery, this 100 million, we have to add this 100 to 200 million. Right? Are you following my line of thought here?
Right.
So then we have ancient India with 20 to 40 million. Ancient China, 10 to 20 million. Rome, 100 to 200 million.
Jesus.
Okay.
Hey, it was
Now,
only
I wish they
1,500
could-
years.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I wish they could show like the per capita kind of thing, right? Of maybe of the world or of the area that has the slaves, because the Rome one is like how many people. That's true over hundreds of years, but it's like how many people were living at that time.
So the scale in here is that 20 to 40% of the population were slaves.
You're right. I've heard something like that. Yeah, that's
ancient Greece
hard to
did
beat.
5 to 10 million. Ancient Egypt did 10 to 20 million. Ancient Mesopotamia did 10 to 20 million. And the prehistoric, pre-recorded times has an estimated 50 to 100 million slaves. So putting all of this in perspective, this transatlantic trade slave, it's just a period in time with a fraction of the entire slave trade, right?
Right.
And we keep focus on it like it was the
Horrible.
only thing that was done in terms of slavery, which it wasn't. And more, it was done by black people to black people. There were not white people in Africa gathering black people to bring it to the coast. It was black people bringing, because they've done that all the time. If you
And
see that,
often,
it's
wasn't
200 million slaves just inside Africa.
I was gonna say like it was often Arabs too that were involved with the original part of the slave trade, right? The gathering of people.
But only on the coast, because you couldn't go
Okay.
inside.
Sure.
The tribes were too fierce for any white man to go into Africa.
It's just as funny how they kind of they don't get blamed for it as a group.
Exactly.
They
And
didn't
for
show-
instance, there is
They
this
didn't
lady.
show the
so-
Barbary pirates. the Barbary pirates were doing a lot of slave trading at that time
Oh, I
with
see.
white people.
You didn't? Let me
I
see.
didn't see it.
There was also what at least in that era ended it was a big part of it was the English outlawing it and actually going to war against any slave ships that they came across. So they,
Right.
whereas the Arabs don't get blamed for their part, the English don't get celebrated for the little. It was a little thing that they did, admittedly.
But in here, they're
Well,
separating. They're separating the Arab Muslim
I
slave
saw that,
trade
which is
from
maybe
from the African one. So the Arabs did up to 100 million slaves.
they kept it going. It's not like they stopped it and said new era. It was
Right.
just same tune, different era that we define it.
But no, I don't have the.
All
What-
very interesting. And isn't it horrible how people are that we will accept that? That people just accept to doing it, even, right? I mean, understandably.
but look at
slaves
from
had
this
no
point.
choice.
What is the only of this on this chart? What is the only one that can be used as a political weapon?
What do you mean?
Transatlantic.
It's the transatlantic.
Right.
Because you cannot use modern slavery because we don't recognize that there is slavery at the world right now, and we saw there's 100 to 200 million just since in the last years, right? So and all the others, there's just history lost to the wind, as all under the water, as if the slaves in Rome didn't suffer. And what were the slaves in Rome? Were white people, because black slaves in Rome were only 5 to 10%, and they were highly valuable because they were rare, and they were brought by the Arabs. You're right, they were brought by the Arabs. But this is not mentioned that the Ottoman Empire, white slaves.
Right.
So there's a relation 10-1 in relation to white slaves, Asian slaves, and black slaves. Right? They had the least of that, and the most of that is done by themselves to themselves.
Well,
And
it's
yet-
not really a well thought out position, and I think it's used as this shame tool. And you have to ask yourself, if you don't have a society built off of these principles of shame, how useful is the tool of shame to get people to act on your behalf?
Sure.
Probably not that good, right?
Exactly.
So having that tool of shame is another big indicator of how to manipulate slaves. Is you have to shame them into doing things without touching them. It's a very potent tool.
And they were clever. For instance, the Portuguese would use mixed race people, especially women, to control the trades and the ports. Right? It was not
So
man; it was
Then
mixed
people
women.
empathized with them and didn't hurt them.
Sorry.
Was that because then people empathized with them and didn't hurt them?
No, because it's the only way you make a connection that both black and white people can trust. Right? So you
That's
have
what I
this
mean, empathize.
this very famous mixed race woman that did the trade for about 35 years there. She was highly respected, highly ruthless, right? Because she was given the power. Among others, she was selected, but for being the most ambitious, the one with less scruples, the one that only cared for her own profit, right? And she couldn't care less by the people. She didn't care about the Portuguese, and she didn't care about the black people. She cared about herself. But because she was dark-skinned, the black guys that came to sell the slaves think, oh, this guy, she's not trying to fool us and give us a lower price or so on because she's half ours. And the Portuguese trusted her because her father was a white man that they controlled since the beginning. Right? All of this was programmed. So
And now we can see why people take on different shields of religion. And they're not really that religion, but they say they are. And so everyone goes, well, he's all right.
He's all right. Yeah.
They
He's
say,
the-
"Oh,
he's the
got
lesser
this.
evil. It's the lesser evil.
No, he knows. He's my guy. He's okay.
Think about Barack Obama. His mother was a CIA agent who was being used as a sex kitten. Why not? let's use the kid, he's here. Let's raise him into something that's going to be president. Let's give him all the training and all the rest of it. It's like you've got dictators basically because they're raised from birth for these positions,
and not for their abilities. Because if you look into Bush's son, right, his cognitive abilities are not the best, and then the alcohol and drugs did the rest, right? So it's not because they are smarter than us because of how they were engineered or educated. They don't care. It just cares for the lineage and the fact that they are controllable. That's the only thing that matters.
The most obvious example right now is Emmanuel Macron, whose husband is right by his side with his package out. It's like it's clearly an op from birth, or maybe high school, to try and get this nobody kid into a position so that he could exert power for you, the guys behind the scenes, the guy who created him. And you got these obvious examples all over the place right now. I don't know if Trump exists as that. Maybe.
Well, he first ran. I was just going to say Trump ran for president in 1990 something
on the Reform Party ticket.
Right. So he's been at least considering it. Okay, 2000 he ran. He ran originally.
You know what his big campaign slogan was? His opponent, what's his name?
Something to do with Japan or something.
No, because he was in the primaries, right? Because this was the new Reform Party. Everybody was sick of politics, so they ran over to a third party. Pat Buchanan. So he was running against Pat Buchanan, and all he could talk about is how much of a Nazi Pat Buchanan is, and how he's a goose-stepping Nazi and all the rest of this stuff. He was using all the same tactics that they used against him. And the reason why is because his one job was to keep Pat Buchanan out of the Reform Party. Because they didn't want him running against George Bush. That was part of Roger Stone's play for the Republican Party. He was a Republican Party operative. So it's like they're keeping these guys down on the third party wing because you're not allowed to have those options. There are certain options that are just not publicly acceptable.
Yeah, but
so isn't it existential dread of all these options? We never actually have a real option that we're ever presented with.
Look, that's what I was saying. Politically speaking, it's always the lesser evil. There's no one ever that we can say, hey, he's Jesus, he's the savior, he's the guy who's going to change all of this. No, it's just the lesser evil all the time. But isn't it naive to consider when we say, and this is a matter of how we express ourselves, and I understand what you mean, but this is for the people listening. When we say that Trump decided to make his campaign like this, he didn't decide shit. He didn't decide nothing, because he hires people to decide how is going to be his campaign. All of this is highly studied in terms of marketing, in terms of populace reception, what they're wanting to hear, and these guys give them exactly what these people want to hear to capture that kind of the population, right? So this is not a Greek philosopher that thinks for 3 days what he's going to speak to and gets there and makes his own speech. Everything is created. So
I think they are very well versed, and even Trump may be well versed in neuro-linguistic programming. He's very specific in the words he chooses and is not dumb like people like to portray him. He's not dumb at all in his neuro-linguistic programming type of presentations.
Right. Well, he produces a type of anxiety when you're watching him. Like, what is he going to say next and all the rest of this stuff? And he talks kind of like a child.
Nick one time said, I really do think he's a chaos magician, and I haven't been able to, take that out of my head. He's like, he loves chaos, as you just alluded to, Headless, that he'll hit you subconsciously on some like fear thing, and then he'll present like, but I'm the best, and no one will solve it like me, type of thing,
Right. Well, nobody knows exactly what he's going to say, and that could be a put on. I mean, like, he might be using that to get people's. The whole Texas thing about George Bush was a put on. He wasn't really a Texan.
No,
Like,
he was. Those guys were New Englander elitists. Yeah,
he was
that's
scared of
the point.
horses.
The
So
Bushes
he
were not Texan.
Right. He was scared of horses, and they wanted to show him in his native roughneck environment. So he was always doing chores with big branches and stuff.
Sure.
But he was never on a horse. And it's like all of that was staged. None
Yeah.
of that was organic. They were going for a certain perception of this guy, and basically their whole lives are presented us to in that fashion. It's like we never know what's real about
I
these
really
people.
thought that was an amazing mediation that the Bushes, being from New England, and so collegiate New Englander, summer home in Maine, all this like portrayed themselves as badass Texans. It's like, wow, you did it because you own an oil company. You claimed yourself as Texan.
I went
Crazy.
to high school with his daughters.
Wow.
I was there with when he was governor.
That was
So
a
we
missed
always-
opportunity.
Oh man, they were alcoholics in high school, dude. They were
Really?
coming to class all trash.
It's a family trait. It's a family
Yep.
trait. So
I'm not surprised at all by it. But yeah, we always knew there were bomb threats in the high school because the Bush girls would be ushered out first, and then everybody else would hear about it.
So there were numerous bomb threats on your high school because of the Bush girls attending.
Yeah, I think those were time travelers actually.
Was it a private school, or what was the school
No,
situation?
it was just Austin High School. It was the Central High School for Austin, Texas.
So when he was governor.
Right.
Wow. I'm surprised he sent his kids to public high
Yeah.
school.
Go figure. It was a
Right.
really
I guess they got to
community.
learn. They probably got to learn, life lessons as everyone does.
Who knows? I
Mm.
mean, there could be any number of reasons, but
So
yeah,
that sounds like a big high school. It was probably over 3,000 kids or something, or what?
I think
it was
it looks nice
big.
if you say that our kids are going to the same institution
Right.
to learn
Well, that's
as
true.
everybody
That's a good
else.
point. That's a good point. I just thought for sure being with their elite nature. So it was a couple of thousand kids at least, or what?
Oh yeah, it was a big school. I mean,
Yeah.
it was right in the middle of, and they had busing too, which was odd. You have all these people from all these different communities all coming together, and it's like, why are we doing this?
Because there's so many kids
all the
directly
time.
around. Right.
Right. Yeah, it was not a very peaceful place.
Mm.
This was like the last year that they had streaking. So this was like an Austin High tradition. Like they would have 4 or 5 streakers at the pep rally. But that last year they did that, I was there. But I mean, it harkens back to a really different time. Nobody really thinks about these traditions that were started in like the 70s and 80s, kind of surviving into the 90s. It's kind of an interesting thing. But I mean, I think we've lost 90% of our rebellious culture, Like I don't think that's coming back anymore. All these Democrats keep hoping for like a 60s uprising or whatever. I don't think that's coming again.
Don't you think it's technologically induced too?
Could be.
Yeah,
I mean,
It seems to
smart.
me it's the function of the phone, but
who wants to fall for another psyop? How many times have people been wrong about stuff? I mean, look, after COVID, nobody wants to believe or even acknowledge what the government did to us, So they're just sort of staying away from all this stuff. This is why the Democrats still have a 26% approval rating, even after the major drop off of Trump's approval rating. It's like nobody wants to believe any of this shit is happening.
So hard to bring up the time period and what was redundant parasitic development off of this sickness. It's so hard to even bring it up. And maybe it's like same thing, like you bring up that certain people are corrupt and they support them. It's like they can't, because they've supported them. And if you supported the shot, then like you can't, you don't want to go there. Maybe, I don't know. It's
I think there's a lot of people that because of I'm sorry to say it, their ignorance of the matter, still support the shot. Right? And these are just misguided people that choose to believe in something because if they don't believe it, then the whole world crumbles.
That's the thing about being partisan, right? You've built your whole worldview onto that, right?
So if they are acting against me, what is my life in this society?
Right. Right. Existential
I
crisis.
can't believe that they are acting against me, because if I do, then what am I doing? Who am I after in all of this, right? So
They've
those
been waiting
realities
for
that no one wants to face.
they've been waiting since 2023 for a rational explanation that they can all latch onto. Something that doesn't make other people upset because it just sounds rational enough for them to get by with it.
Of
And
the
it's not coming.
origination? Of
Of
the
the
origination?
origin, everything else. They just want it all laid out in front of them. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. We're just going to go with this thing and then we're going to move on. It's not coming. There's no explanation. So a lot of people have checked out because they don't want to believe the implications. They're not looking at their vagus nerves are on fire because
Well, and
of what they think they did to themselves.
it's strange to me, just in the very beginning, there's this new virus. What did they have a fucking name for it yet? I don't even know. And it came from this town with an epidemiological study based on sickness and what is it called? The amplification of the virus to study it. I forget the term.
Epivirus.
Sorry?
Epivirus.
Right. So they're literally doing a study on this type of virus and immunological stuff in the town where it started. And every time you
No,
brought
that's
people
not
would,
how it is. It's more complex. I can give you the whole
no,
line
but
of
I'm just
story.
saying, like, you could just talk about it started in Wuhan and there is a biological.
But it didn't start it in Yuan.
Okay,
It
okay, go
started
ahead.
in the United States, in the University of the United States. And then National Geographic was called to come and see this epivirus development. And so National Geographic did, and you can find the magazine, that is funny. National Geographic went, did the report, and in the report indicated that it doesn't seem to be a reason to do something so dangerous, because you cannot target a group of the population. Everyone is targeted. So the Congress itself banned the production of epivirus publicly in the United States. So the epivirus are now only developed in black projects or in hidden facilities. They are no longer done in universities. But then you have Dr. Fauci, that was a big supporter of the development of the epivirus, collecting from several rich people $1 million. Those $1 million were the money that he gave to Dr. Chi that appeared in the news, right? So this is all half lies, half truths. Dr. Chi got that $1 million and took care of taking all the research and all the samples to Wuhan, that because she was doing an interchange of academics between the Wuhan lab and this university. She was part of the protocol. So she interrupted the procedures in the United States and moved the whole set to Wuhan, right? And until that point, they couldn't make the virus to mingle with the human blood and have an effect. They were just not able to do it. So they tried with several animals. And that's where you get the animals from the news. They say there was this pigs, there was the bat, and so on. And it was through the bat that they finally managed the virus to enter the body. And then you have the leak of the lab, right? And this mingles then with 5G towers being installed and so on. There's a lot of complications in this, but that's how the whole thing happened.
Right. I just mean to say that even the topical knowledge that there's a virus studying facility in the town where it kind of broke out,
Of course.
people were still like, no, it's not human, it's not man-made, it's not, don't worry. Like even it was right in front of our faces, right? There's no like detective skill required. Like,
Exactly. But even bright people could be
well,
bamboozled,
I
bamboozled
proceeded.
by this.
I
You see,
proceeded. You're right. You're right. I proceeded in not being certain, but those two facts. It started in the town. Fact one,
of
where
course, where it
the
was being
scientific
stewed.
study. It's like, okay, I'm on pause right now. I'm
So
definitely not taking
you,
no
you have
shots.
you have Professor Ramasinga. That I can't say his name properly. Is the advocate of life being propagated by means of universal in space particles. So it's that's for him, that's how life came about. And he defended, and he defends to this day, that COVID was caused by this, something from space that invaded the atmosphere and fell into certain places and caused the dissemination of the disease. Right? And this is a bright people. He's extremely intelligent. Right? He's a guy that shown multiple times his extraordinary capacity to develop solutions and hypotheses and problems and
So what do
solve.
you think he's trying to do? He's trying to dissuade and distract, or
No,
what?
he doesn't have the information, right?
Mhm.
Because everything that I told you is public.
Right.
And
And
yet,
I'm just saying, Occam's razor, even ignorant. This is in the town where this is. Forget it. Like, this is Occam's razor. It's the simplest explanation. Please show me otherwise,
sure,
and then I'll
and it is on purpose, obviously.
right. No, sure, right.
It's not
Well,
an
I mean,
accident.
these scientists have no stomach for getting outside of their field and studying something.
Ricardo,
so-
when you brought up that asteroid impact related to the guy's study of Indonesia and the area, I was like, oh, he didn't know. How does he not know about that?
Yeah,
To
he
your point,
studies seismology and tsunamis, and the
right.
biggest
How did
tsunami
he
of
not know?
the biggest tsunami in the Indic that caused these chevrons that are
Well,
typical.
I know. I think he was a geologist specifically, though, right? But
right.
No,
There's
he
so
said-
much of it.
He said at the beginning that his specialty was tsunamis.
disasters of right.
Yeah. So, but it's
What do you
easy
think?
for people to miss these things, even if they are experts in their fields. Why?
Right.
Because there is no interdisciplinary discussion. Everything is closed within boxes. This is not the way to evolve science. This is the way to stagnate science. Because the only evolution that come is on that specific box. That's why we have the same technology we had 100 years ago. We just become better at it. Right? And in terms of electronics, we have the same technology we had 60 years ago. We just made it smaller and more efficient.
Right.
We are
It's
not evolving.
It's siloing. I think people need to get outside of those silos so that they can absorb the implications of what they're studying right in front of their faces. Because if you don't know the implications, you'll just let it go and think, well, maybe
Look,
that's interesting. But there's a wider world out there,
If you have one Congress a year where all scientific advancements were spoken to all the scientific community representatives, right? Where people could take notes and say, "Oh, I can relate this to I can."
That would
push
lead
this
to more
that."
discoveries.
Right? But no, the Congress are all focused on one discipline alone. So everyone
idea.
is listening to things that they already know, right? Because there's only so much you can. It's like Egypt with Dr. Zahir Awas that gave us a lot of material for us to analyze, and most of our opinions are based in papers and studies that he did on the field. But there is no evolution. It continues on the same paradigm, no matter what he found, because he can relate everything to what he's looking for. He never looked for, okay, let's see who's the guys from astroarchaeology. Where are the guys from acoustics? Where's the guys from mineralogy? Where's the guys from environmental change? So nothing of this is considered because they only focus on. I know all the answers. That's why he says we only know all of this stuff. We might find a new body or a new tomb or whatever, but we only know all of this stuff. There is no need to do anything else. That's why he says there's no need to do more research because we already know all of it. Right? And that's how he stagnates things. And this happens in all areas of science, not just in Egyptology.
Right. Science is a theology. And I think that comes from the universities that create it, which were all religious institutions. And so the model for how they teach kids is a monastic one. So these college professors, getting tenure and all the rest of these ancient concepts comes through the Christian universities. And this is why you get a large siloing, because they didn't want things to interrupt the different narratives they had going. So they had to keep all of these things separate so that you wouldn't upset the clergy.
Sure, and that's why they created materialism. because
Right.
before that you had these natural philosophers that were basically animistic people that saw powers and energies in all things and looked at multiple disciplines at the same time in order to explain the solution. And they needed to convert, while they were saying publicly that they want to deviate science from religion, what they were doing is create a new religion that is science. Because
Right.
they needed to create a dogma within the procedures of how to do science in order to control it. Right?
Cultural diffusion. Cultural diffusion. So they took what they knew, which was this, Christian-based clerical institution, and then they turned it into a scientific religion. And that's why it took the form that it did, because it is kind of a religious institution.
We can't tolerate that to have these fellows that are heroes to science like Newton, and when he's a Christian and he's at the same time he's an alchemist and therefore an animist. So you can't have both things. You have to be strict from this point on, right? You have to
Right.
just follow one doctrine, and that is our religion, our scientific method, right? That centers you on that narrow path, and you only have to record what you find on that narrow path instead of looking with a broader sight. It's like seeing light as white instead of the combination of all colors.
Absolutely. Well, what do you say? You want to wrap it up?
Yeah. Then.
Tell them where they can find you, Ricardo.
Okay, so you can find me at Ricard Calvary1 at X, History, Myths, and Legends in YouTube, Institute for NATO Philosophy.org. I will also want to recommend a new podcast, There is Universe Unveiled, done by two wonderful ladies that bring a completely new facet to how podcast. And I would also plug in my books, so Stardust and The Resonant Earth, that you can find at Amazon, both of them by the name. And thank you for another great conversation. Although I'm late, but I'm sorry about that.
Well, thank you for making it. Ethan, go ahead and tell them where they can find your stuff.
Salute, you guys. That was awesome. Ricardo will forgive you for being an intercontinental traveler for being late. And yeah, I'm on all the usual suspects with social media. I have a few books out there too, and always putting out articles, often in relation to them or what have you. And yeah, great topic of discussion. Appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. And join us on Thursday. I'm going to be having my mailbag then, and we might be doing more magic shows possibly on Tuesday. So you might want to check that out and join us again next time. See ya.